I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin, and like everyone else, including the President of the United States, tonight we're mourning the loss of a true prince.
It's time we all reach out for something new. That means you too. You say you want a leader.
Even with Prince's passing, the presidential contest speeds on. So, on the show tonight, a Democratic fundraising haul, the May delegates brawl, and a family tell-all. But first, a Trump town hall. On the same day as Donald Trump surrogate Sarah Palin came out against ESPN's firing of baseball pitcher Curt Schilling over a Facebook post about transgender bathroom laws in North Carolina, Trump himself was asked about the issue on NBC's Today. He called the push for such laws discriminatory and said he believes that transgender individuals should be able to use whichever bathroom they choose.
Been very few complaints the way it is. People go, they use the bathroom that they feel is appropriate. There has been so little trouble, and the problem with what happened in North Carolina is the strife and the economic punishment that they're taking. So I would say that's probably the best.
Do you have any transgender people working in your organization?
I don't know.
No?
I really don't know. I probably do. I really don't know.
So if Caitlyn Jenner were to walk into Trump Tower and want to use the bathroom, you would be fine with her using any bathroom she chooses?
That is correct.
Those comments that Trump made on at a Today town hall at 30 Rock this morning on NBC drew an almost immediate reaction from the frontrunner's principal Republican rival and a leading figure in right-wing talk radio who is often quite supportive of Trump.
Donald agreed with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in attacking the state of North Carolina for passing their bathroom ordinance. Now, let me ask you, have we gone stark raving nuts? Are there any parents of daughters here? I'm the father of 2 little girls. Here is basic common sense. Grown adult men, strangers, should not be alone in a bathroom with little girls.
No problem with LGBT bathrooms. I mean, if you think you're a woman at 2 o'clock this afternoon and want to use the ladies' room, have at it. If you're really a guy, it doesn't matter. If you like a woman, go in. No problem. We'll see if there's any blowback on that.
So with these comments, Trump has now taken a position that could hurt him in this nomination fight and potentially help him in a general election. John, is Trump taking this position, you think, out of principle or a sense of the politics of it?
Well, I think the answer is is principle, and of course it suggests something not flattering about Trump, which is that in my judgment, Trump is probably, I think in his gut, a social liberal. I think his position on abortion, for instance, the position he held for most of his life, is the real position, what he really thinks about abortion. Today, he's talked about how he was for the 3 exceptions: rape, incest, life of the mother. I think on this issue, he's like most Manhattanites or most New Yorkers. He's basically a social liberal. I think he's saying what's in his heart. I also think he knows that it helps him politically in the general election. These 2 other gentlemen, Mr. Limbaugh and Mr. Cruz, they're obviously incredibly crude in how they talk about this issue and have no real respect for people who are transgendered. But I think Trump speaking his heart.
I think he is speaking his heart, and that's what's leading it. But it clearly has potential political benefit. If Trump can take the sting out of social issues in a general election, issues of tolerance that a lot of young voters care about, and make this a general election, if he's a nominee, about economics and about competence, his chances of winning are a lot greater. So I think it's leading with his heart, but helps him politically, and he knows it.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I'm sure he knows it. And look,
could have dodged the question.
One of the questions, yeah, easily could have dodged the question. He's dodged many questions. One of the bigger overarching questions going forward is when Trump tries to make the pivot to the general election, as all nominees do. How many of the positions, whether it's on the Mexican border wall or many other issues, that he's stated in very base-pleasing ways, or throwing red meat to the base, when he walks, how many of them is he going to try to walk back? And if he walks them back to where he probably may actually be, if you look at his history on these issues, will he get called on that for hypocrisy, or will it just simply benefit him in a straightforward way that you're suggesting?
Yep.
All right. During that Today Show town hall, Trump's family joined him on stage to talk Papa Don. Last night, the Wall Street Journal published a story that featured an interview with the frontrunner in which he said that he's planning a major shift in his campaign, and we are already starting to see the signs of the fruits of that shift. Recently, Trump has traded in his TV hits for other print interviews. Next week, Trump is planning to deliver his first in a series of foreign policy speeches using a machine that he's often raged against, the teleprompter. And during that town hall this morning, his family discussed the lesser seen, toned down side of the Donald.
We're proud of him. I mean, the man's done something that no one's ever done before, and they've tried to hold him back the entire time. I mean, they've really tried to hold him back.
There is the image as the business guy, but when you see him around a family table, I mean, the sense of humor, the love, playing golf with my 20-month-old, like teaching her how to swing a golf club, it's a special moment. It's really incredible to watch, and it's a totally different side that no one really gets to see.
My whole life, I've watched as he's ripped stories out of newspapers that he's read about something that's happened to somebody or adversity that somebody's being faced with, often put in a situation where they don't have the power to affect change and they were unfairly put there. And he'll actually proactively reach out to that person to help them. And that's not reported, that's not seen, but I've witnessed it my whole life. So he's incredibly empathetic in that regard to what's happening to other people.
So, Mark, Trump's pivoting in a lot of ways right now and conducting his campaign differently than what we've seen for the past few months. This is a particular thing. This is a charm offensive, a PR war. How's that going?
It's going well. I think it's beyond charm. It's about convincing the people who are skeptical of him, including the elites, that he can win a general election, that he'd be a good president, that he'd have coattails if he were the nominee, and that he can be a serious person, which would affect all those things. So, yes, winning primaries is big, obviously. Yes, the inside game of converting delegates is a big deal. But this PR thing, I think, is in some ways the thing they're doing most effectively right now, because seeing Trump with his family, seeing him give serious interviews to serious newspapers, giving a foreign policy speech, all very effective.
I think there's it's easy to put these things down as a PR matters. The bottom line is that the people who become president of the United States, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, all those people are able to perform in settings like this one we saw Donald Trump performing at this morning with his family, seeming not like a normal person and seeming like a charming person. All those things are things that he's largely eschewed so far. And I think you're right in terms of reassuring elites, and that's part of the game here. It's not just about collecting these delegates; it's about getting to Cleveland and having elites kind of look at you and say, I wouldn't mind having that guy on the big stage and representing our party.
Our last three presidents had young children when they ran the first time. They didn't have adult children who could speak the way these adult children can. All the kids, I think, do very well for him, and they contextualize him in a way that is super powerful. And, people need to envision, in the Republican Party for Trump to win, they need to envision him as the leader of the party and the president, and that helps a lot. But again, so does, if he does it effectively, a big policy speech.
Right.
All right, more on the Trump front, on the Donald's favorite platform, the Twitter. Frontrunner called for both of his rivals to quit. In a tweet he fired out this morning that said, quote, Senator Ted Cruz has been mathematically eliminated, use of all caps, from race. He said Kasich should get out for same reason. I think both should get out, exclamation point. Now, John, Trump is doing something that he's avoided up until now, saying that they should drop out. Do you think that others will join the call for them to quit?
No one of consequence, I think. You occasionally will hear someone like Mitt Romney suggesting that it might be a good idea if one of them were to get out, but in order to try to stop Trump. I don't imagine you're going to hear Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan or anybody else who's a big figure in the Republican Party suddenly suggesting that anybody should get out or that both should get out, because that would ultimately be.
What do you think will happen if Trump goes over? Do you think then people will say they should get out, or hope for some sort of change or some sort of delegate challenge in Cleveland?
I think, it's a good question. It's hard to know what will happen if we wake up on June 8th and Trump has 1,400 delegates as his campaign claims. I think somewhat implausibly that he will have, whether that will happen. I don't ever see this party rallying around Trump and taking up his cause in that way.
I wonder if Reince Priebus, for instance, would be forced to say these guys should get out of the race. Obviously, it won't happen in big numbers, and maybe not anybody significant until Trump goes over by a legitimate count. But even if he does, I'm not sure people will call for them to get out. I think they may say, look, we know he's not going to clear the bar easily. Something could happen, some legal challenge, something. So I think these guys may stay in and not be asked to get out all the way to Cleveland.
Most of the Republican establishment is, regardless of how well Trump does in an interview or how good his foreign policy speech is or how good he does at a town hall, most of them are still deathly afraid of the notion of Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, and they are all secretly nursing a view that he's really shouldn't be president, that he'd be disastrous for down ballot candidates, and they're like hoping somehow, some way, there's a way to stop him still, even if he gets over 1237.
And even Trump's calls is somewhat nonsensical in the sense that before today, there was no way for these. Nothing's changed. These guys couldn't go over. It's just a question of whether Trump goes over.
Correct. Coming up, the 555. And no, we're not talking about the Domino's pizza deal. We're talking about primaries. We'll be right back with that.
Even the best political minds disagree over the biggest question in presidential politics right now. Can Donald Trump collect the 1,237 delegates he needs before the July convention to earn a majority? Listen to two of the political wise guys who we respect most, former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour and Republican strategist Steve Schmidt.
If you generously apportion a couple of Western state wins to Ted Cruz, you look at the northeastern states, you look ahead to California, 170 plus delegates, winner take all by congressional district, 20-point lead. Very difficult for me to see any scenario where he doesn't clear 1237. And I think the worst he does is he clears it by 60, 70 delegates. I think he'll be right up around 1,300 when we wake up on June the 8th.
Governor Barbour, you're a pretty good vote counter. Is Donald Trump on track to get a majority of delegates?
He has to get about 58% of the remainder. He's been getting in the 40s. His percentage of the vote in New York's the first time he's gotten over 50%. If that repeats itself, it makes it easier. But it's not a given that he's going to be able to get 1237 through by the time of the June 7th primaries.
So you think it's possible and likely, but not definite? Is that accurate?
Or
I think it's more likely. It's the most likely outcome. I think it's less than 50%.
So Haley Barbour pegs it as less than 50%. Steve Schmidt says it's a mortal lock. The question then, will he or won't he? One easy way to look at what's happening between now and the convention is to break the contest down this way. There are 15 primaries left on the Republican side. Break them up in groups of 5, 3 of them. First, there are the 5 Northeast states that vote this coming Tuesday. We've talked a lot about those. Then there's the 5, including California, that wind down the race on June 7. A lot of focus on those 2 days with 5 contests each. But let's now talk about a different set of contests in May. On that day, on that month rather, you've got 5 additional contests totaling 199 delegates. They're spread across the month. Contests in Indiana, Nebraska, West Virginia, and then 2 on the West Coast, Oregon and Washington. After those states vote with the 199 delegates they have, that's more than the Northeast states voting this coming Tuesday. We're going to have a much clearer picture of whether Trump actually can get the delegates it's going to take to gain a majority before the party heads to Cleveland. So, John, part of the problem of handicapping these 5 states is there's almost no polling in any of the 5. But given how the 3 candidates stack up in those May contests, Indiana, Nebraska, West Virginia, Oregon, Washington, what do you think the contours suggest about who is more right? Haley Barbour, who says Trump got less than a 50% chance to get there, or Steve Schmidt, who says, sure thing, take it to the bank?
You know, we did this delegate math exercise in a different way a few days before both Steve and Haley had their views. I continue to think Haley Barbour is more right than Steve Schmidt. I think, you know, it's that the numbers are daunting. You look at these primaries in the middle of the month here, or in the month of May. You know, Indiana is an open primary. West Virginia is an open primary. The open primaries are good for Donald Trump. He's performed well in those because of all the new voters he brings in. Those are states he probably do well in. But Nebraska, very similar to a lot of states in the plains that Ted Cruz has done well in, won in the past. Oregon and Washington, both states where John Kasich should be really competitive. It seems to me that if you think about what Trump needs to do, the percentages he needs to get of the delegates, this may not be a great month for him. It's not clear to me he's going to win more than the only clear winner in that group is West Virginia. To me, all 4 of the other 5 could be ones where he finishes second.
Could be, but I will say this. This is going to be a test. If Steve Schmidt will be right, if Paul Manafort and Rick Wiley and the other new folks and the additional spending are brought to bear. 5 contests over the course of the month. You know, they're spread out. You've got 2 of them on May 10, but the others are all on their own day. It gives them a chance to go in these states and try to leverage Trump's advantages. Big spending, big rallies, Trump mobilizing people. I think it's an open question how good these 5 contests will be for Trump. But I think if Steve Schmidt is right And if these new guys are able to up Trump's game, I think Trump could win all 5 of them. Nebraska's probably the toughest. But other than that, I think it's possible Trump could win 4 of the 5.
Well, the money matters a lot, sure, and there's no doubt about that. And the other thing is he could conceivably, given especially Indiana comes so soon after the contest on Tuesday, he could be on a little bit of a roll and could have something. You get a lot of favorable media coverage if he wins all 5, for instance, next week, or if he wins 4 out of 5 next week. That's certainly possible. He could roll in Indiana with a real head of steam and continue to build through. I just, the overall, again, the absence of polling makes it really hard to figure out. And I'll say, the real question to me is, how hard is June? How well does Trump have to do in June? Because he's got to do, there's no place where his foot can come off the gas here, right? He's got to do well in May. And then the question is, how well does he have to do in June? And there are still a couple of good states for Ted Cruz sitting out there in June. That's part of the reason why I end up with Haley Barbour, because you got winner-take-all states in June in Montana and South Dakota. Again, those are states that look good for Cruz.
In particularly Indiana, Oregon, and Washington, Kasich could be a player. I think probably less so in Nebraska and West Virginia.
Right.
Again, 5 states spread out over the month. You got to ask yourself, when have we seen that? Well, we saw in Wisconsin, a state by itself with a gap. Trump didn't do well there, but there were a lot of factors working against him.
Sure.
There. Now, I'll say, given time, given his ability to campaign, given his ability to spend money, given his new team's ability to work the thing, I just think Trump's advantages in a 3-way race with these 2 guys in these 5 states. I think Schmidt is overstating the case, but I think Haley Barbour's understating it.
You're being Mr. Goldilocks.
I'm going right between.
You're going to go right between the 2 guys.
I don't think it's a mortal lock, but I think if Trump performs, I think everybody agrees he's going to perform very well next Tuesday. So these 5 in May are so key. If Trump performs as well as I think he could, if he lives up to 80% of his potential in these 5 states, I think he'll be on the doorstep of winning and won't need to absolutely kill on those 5 contests in June.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions you have to ask is, again, it goes back to this money thing. You think about those big states in Oregon and Washington. John Kasich has no money. Donald Trump has a lot of money. What happens in those states up in the Pacific Northwest? What do those states look like? What's your view about that?
Well, they're close contests. That makes it tougher for Trump. They're both proportional representation. Those states have got conservative parts and more moderate parts. I still believe that there's no reason to think they're not decent Trump states. They're states that are going to be open to different aspects of his message. They are states that tend to care more about free trade and because they're so connected to the Pacific. Maybe there's a less good for Trump because the trade issue may not play as well. All right, when we come back, you'll never believe how much money Bernie Sanders has banked. Well, you might after this. Another FEC filing deadline has come and gone, and another extraordinary result for Bernie Sanders and his campaign. Just as the delegate math has made it very, very difficult for him to catch up to Hillary Clinton, incoming filings from March show that Sanders raised $46 million last month from more than 900,000 donors. Hillary Clinton raised less, $26.8 million. Sanders, however, also outspent Clinton in March. He put out $45.7 million compared to Clinton's $28.7 million over the course of the month. John, what are your big takeaways from these 2 numbers for Sanders versus Clinton, spending and raising?
Well, look, the first, I mean, just in terms of it's very one of the, I think it's the start at the very top. It is really one of the most staggering and unexpected things that has happened in this entire campaign cycle is that someone would raise more money than Hillary Clinton, and that someone would be.
Oh no, in our careers.
Yes. Okay. That's it's true, right? I mean, if you think about where we were a year ago, and then that it would be a 74-year-old self-proclaimed socialist who talks about revolution and attacks the oligarchy. Money in politics generally, not always, generally has come from rich people. Bernie Sanders doesn't talk to rich people. He doesn't do fundraisers. He doesn't have bundlers. He doesn't have any of that stuff, and yet he has outraised her. And he's outraised her at a moment when his chances of getting the nomination has been foreclosed, more or less.
That's one of the 2 myths that he has exploded, not just this month, but throughout this campaign. One myth says, you can only raise money in a serious way in millions and tens of millions if you've got bundlers, if you've got fat cats. Sanders has proven you can raise millions and millions with no fat cats, no bundlers, and no fundraising events, basically. The other myth he's exploded is this notion that whoever spends the most wins. You can buy the election. Sanders outspent Clinton in New York. He's outspent her in a lot of other states that he's lost. Right. And it shows that what Sanders' side generally says, which is big money can buy elections, it just isn't true.
Right. The other thing is, I mean, again, to your first point, what I think is key, you and I talk about this all the time, the internet is an incredible tool, and very few politicians have mastered it. Barack Obama did. Very few have to raise money. But if you can find a good internet brand and you know how to work it, that internet can be the thing that frees you from a lot of the most oppressive aspects of being a candidate.
Now, look, in some states, Sanders has outspent Clinton and lost, but caught up, right?
Yeah.
He's closed the gap, and you could argue I was less well known. In New York, he spent more. He didn't close the gap at all. In fact, the gap, to some extent, based on the public polling, got bigger, even after he was badly outspending her. Money does not buy you wins.
Right. All right. Before the break, we have to talk about one of the most groundbreaking artists politically in some ways, certainly artistically and commercially in terms of business of our time. That would be Prince Rogers Nelson, who died today at the age of 57 in his home in Minnesota. All afternoon, we've been running through our Prince memories and our catalogs, and one that stood out was the release of Sign of the Times back in 1987, an album that right off the bat with its first song confronted AIDS and violence and other issues of that time in a way that only Prince could.
In France, a skinny man died of a big disease with a little name. By chance, his girlfriend came across a needle and soon she did the same. At home, there were 17-year-old boys and their idea of fun is being in a gang called the Disciples, high on crack, toting a machine gun.
Today, President Obama released a statement on Prince's passing saying that, quote, nobody's spirit was stronger, bolder, or more creative, end quote. And we'd add that he was an outspoken artist on a number of issues, including recently Black Lives Matter. Mark, on the political front, what impressions are there in your mind about the great Prince?
You know, so there's so many celebrities now. We're going to see a lot of deaths of famous people who touched tens of millions of lives. Prince is special, though. Prince was one of the greatest artists in his field, and even when he wasn't being explicitly political, the power of his voice and the way he used race and sexuality and talent to touch people and move people and make people think, quite uncommon for a rock star.
You know, you think about this year, we've lost David Bowie, we've lost Prince. A friend of mine wrote to me today and said, you know, there aren't new ones in the pipeline. You know, there's no new Prince, there's no new David Bowie. You know, he was radical and political in terms of how he ran his business, in almost more than in the way that he was an artist. That picture we had up there where he had slave written on his face was when he was in a great dispute with his record label about who was going to own the rights to his songs. And he waited out Warner Brothers for 20 years so he could get back the power of his own catalog, very much in the context of having seen a lot of African-American artists over the course of their career exploited by record companies. He saw the internet coming. He saw technology changing things. He fought a long fight. He was a radical in the economic and technological wars as much as he was in the standard kind of political discussions that we have. But there's a politics there too, and that way he was an exemplar. People like Jay-Z now follow the Prince path in order to get free from their record labels. Very powerful example, and of course one of the most amazing musicians I've ever seen, and that anybody has ever had the great pleasure of witnessing.
All right, coming up, we're going to talk to one of Donald Trump's senior advisors, the great Barry Bennett, about what the other candidates are still doing in the race from the Trump point of view. We'll be right back after a quick break.
What B.B. King is to the blues, this B.B. is to Trump-related news. Like that little poetry there, that was good. Barry Bennett, senior advisor to Donald Trump's campaign, joins us here on set. Barry, explain to me how it is that the assertion that your campaign is now making 1,400 pledged delegates. Just explain how that's actually plausible.
Well, I think that, once you get to 1238, you're probably at 1,600, right? I mean, the parade starts and people start jumping on board. I mean, this phenomenon that we're beginning to see now, with an explosion in the polling just in the last few days. I mean, Ted Cruz is now finishing last in all of the Northeast states.
Right. So just to be clear, that would suggest that you're going to get to 1237 before June 7th.
Yeah, I think so.
So when's that going to happen? according to your projections. What day do we get there?
I think it's in June.
In June.
Yeah.
What contests are there in June besides June 7th?
We've got these unpledged folks that the AP is slowly identifying one by one as well.
Okay.
Does Mr. Trump's tweet represent the position of the campaign that you all think that Ted Cruz and John Kasich should quit the race?
Well, he admitted, yesterday that there's no way for him to get to 1237.
We didn't need to admit it, though. We all knew we've done that for a while.
He's been disbelieving the laws of math for a while. So, if you can't win, there's no way him going to a second ballot gets him anything other than watching some establishment person become the nominee. All these people who are helping him now will pretend they've never met him by the time we get to the second ballot.
So again, I want to come back to the point you just made, but should they quit the race or not?
Yeah, I think they've campaigned really hard. They've done a great job, but Ted Cruz lost every county, finished last in every county in New York.
Can I get you to look at the camera there and say, Ted Cruz and John Kasich, you should quit?
Well, I think it's time.
They should quit?
Yeah.
Okay. So you just suggested that if somehow you didn't get to a majority, and I know Paul Manafort and others say you'll get to majority, but let's say you didn't. Mm-hmm. You're saying Ted Cruz would not win on a second or third ballot, someone else would?
Oh, we're going to win on the first ballot, first of all. But no, he's the Trojan horse for the establishment.
So who'd the nominee be if there was second
whoever
or third
they
ballot?
want. It's Speaker Ryan, it's Mitt Romney, it's Marco Rubio, it's somebody, whoever they choose. They're not going to Ted Cruz, as you guys both know, is one of the most unpopular persons in Washington ever. They didn't fall in love with him, they're using him.
Well, but Washington doesn't pick the nominee, the delegates do.
Well, but the establishment, they're the ones that are trying to, get to a second ballot.
Well, but he's got the second most delegates. He's still winning delegates.
Yeah, but once you get to the third ballot, everybody's up for grabs.
Right, but you concede, right, that you guys might not get to 1237.
No,
you wouldn't. It's impossible. There's no possibility, zero possibility. It is guaranteed you will get to 1237. Guaranteed.
100% certain.
100% certain.
Haley Barbour says less than 50%.
I used to work for Haley Barbour, and I love
your crystal ball. You got a great crystal ball here.
Explain the confusion, because you all have a vested interest, and no taking away from you all have a vested interest saying, of course, you get there. Your friend Jeff Rowe, who works for Ted Cruz, says they'll never get there.
Yeah.
But Haley Barbour, he seems impartial in this, right? He seems pretty friendly towards Mr. Trump in many ways. Yeah. He says done deal. Not a done deal, less than 50%. Steve Schmidt says done deal. Where's the disconnect between those who are disinterested parties, who say you definitely will, and those who say less than 50%?
Because they're not looking at current polling, first of all. They're trying to extend this political narrative. But if you look at what's happening in the states in the last 10 days, Ted Cruz is really following hard. I don't know why. But you look at the Fox National poll, he fell 10 points nationally. But now he's finishing last behind Kasich in Rhode Island and Maryland and Pennsylvania and, it's Connecticut even. He's just not connecting with the voters. Who's
running your campaign now?
Donald Trump, first of all.
And who's second? Who's second in command?
Well, there's no second. There's Cory and Paul both.
Who do you report to?
I talk to both of them.
Who do you report to?
I talk to Paul. I report to Paul through delegates. Yes.
Okay. You used to report to Cory.
Well, they're both higher on the food poll than me.
I understand, but you now work for Paul.
Yeah, Paul's running Washington.
Who told you were now working for Paul as opposed to Cory?
Cory.
Cory did.
Yeah.
Who else has switched over from working for Cory to working for?
Well, the Washington office is under Paul, so everybody in Washington.
So the report. There's been a lot of reports about friction, about a lot of contention within your campaign about this change. About originally Paul Manafort was hired to run the convention. Mm-hmm. Now he seems to have a bigger role than that. You're reporting to him for one thing. Mm-hmm. How at the level of contention right now within the campaign is on a scale of 1 to 10, is with 10 being the most in terms of internal friction, 10 being the most, 1 being the least. Where are you at?
I don't think it's very fair. Everybody I talk to, there's so many jobs to do. There's so much work to be done. People are just doing their job.
Everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about some things that have been reported. Tell us if they're true or not. Mr. Trump giving a foreign policy speech in Washington next Wednesday?
I don't know about next Wednesday, but you would expect him to give more policy speeches in the coming days.
What other topics?
Whatever policy issues present themselves.
They have
to be relevant.
Is there a teleprompter set up in his office for him to practice?
I'm not in his office.
Do you know if there is?
He was very good on the teleprompter. He's got a lot of teleprompter
He wasn't.
experience.
He practiced last time, but is there a teleprompter set up in Trump Tower as far as you know?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of. The other thing that's out there is that you guys are going to start spending more on TV ads than you have. Is that true?
Yes, lots.
When will that start?
I think it's starting right now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Will you advertise in all 15 remaining states?
I think some of the states don't make a lot of sense. The proportional states, going from 45% to 50% gets you 2 extra delegates. I wouldn't spend $2 million to do that, but I would in California and Indiana.
Do you have polling in Nebraska?
No.
Is that a winnable state for Donald Trump?
Probably, yeah.
Is there any state among the 15 remaining states that you think you can't win?
No.
They're all winnable.
They're winnable.
Right.
Especially if the current trend goes, we will win them all.
I know endorsements are not a huge deal for you all, but you did get the endorsement of Chris Christie, made a big deal of that. Ben Carson made a big deal of that. Jeff Sessions. No other big name has endorsed since those three. There have been other endorsements, but
maybe 10 congressmen or something.
Yeah, no offense to the House, but you know what I'm saying.
I'm
No
a House
senators,
guy.
no
I'm a
governors.
House guy.
I understand.
We're offended.
Why not? Are you all not soliciting
We haven't
them,
solicited a single one.
Not a single one. Why hasn't anyone come forward? A guy who, from your point of view, is the inevitable Republican nominee. You'd think someone else would say, hey, good idea to get on board now, be the 4th major person to endorse.
I literally hear from somebody every day.
But why aren't they endorsing? Are you all telling them not to?
Well, we don't have enough time. We're actually campaigning for delegates, not campaigning in Washington for a bunch of congressional
Well, Chris Christie
endorsements.
met you in Texas. I mean...
Yeah. And, campaign for us hard. Ben Carson is working very hard.
So just to be clear, there are big name people who would get a lot of attention when they endorse, who want to endorse, and you all have held them off?
Well, there are members of Congress. I mean, you can decide whether or not
including
they're big
senators?
Names. I don't know about senators, so I hear a lot of House guys. I'm a House guy.
Yeah,
I'm a House
okay.
guy.
I want to come back to this thing again. Kind of amazing. 15 states still to vote, a lot of voters, and yet you're guaranteeing that you're going to have the 1237. Guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
You're staking your reputation on it.
Yeah.
So if you guys
6 or 7 different paths to 1237.
So if you guys go get to 1237, we can put you in a dunk tank down here.
Absolutely, I'll come up willingly and go to the dunk tank.
Okay, dunk tanks.
Should the RNC, given your position, should the RNC let your campaign play a bigger role in planning the convention now, or not until you go over?
I think that they have a role to play, and they got to be neutral. We'll get there. The program is the most important part of the convention for us. We're already working very hard on the Rules Committee. Paul's got a lot of experience at that. We'll be fine.
So, are you allowed to give them any input? Have you been giving any input on the convention?
We've been getting updates. Yeah.
Updates, but not input.
Well, no, it would be presumptuous. Yeah, we're waiting.
Waiting until you go over.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump was quoted the other day as suggesting the RNC didn't have enough showmen to put together an entertaining convention. Is that a concern?
Well, that's not. We're not like the Democrats who have a lot of people with entertainment experience. We could breathe some fresh air. We could do the Oak Ridge Boys, or,
Clint Eastwood.
We could bring, God bless the USA back out one more time.
Good chance that Clint Eastwood will speak at the convention.
The chair's coming.
Chair's coming back.
All right, Barry Bennett. Thank you. I'm looking forward to that dunk tank. That's going to be a big moment for us.
Now, go in if I don't, right?
We're going to put that on TV. I never made such offer. When we come back, we'll get the inside scoop from the big RNC meeting in Florida right after this.
There are a lot of big Hollywood types in Hollywood, Florida, Republican officials, including last night John Kasich and Ted Cruz, all gathering there for a Republican National Committee meeting, the last time the RNC will gather before this summer's convention in Cleveland. A lot on the agenda there, but the big deal is in the hallways and in the private rooms where a lot of top Republicans are talking about what will happen. Is Donald Trump inevitable or not? The Trump campaign has a big presence down in Hollywood, Florida today, meeting with RNC officials. Joining us now to talk about Paul Manafort, Rick Wiley, and other Trump people in Florida and what they're trying to do is our colleague, Bloomberg's John McCormick. John joins us now by Skype from Hollywood. John, tell us about your conversation today with Paul Manafort and what the Trump folks' agenda is down there.
Yeah, well, they're basically trying to make friends. And, as we've reported in recent days, there's been a lot of tension between the RNC and the Trump campaign. So Mr. Manafort and Rick Wiley have been making the rounds. They've been doing a lot of one-on-one meetings with RNC officials, and of course, all these RNC members are also delegates who are going to go to the national convention. In fact, today, this gathering in Hollywood is probably the biggest gathering of delegates between now and Cleveland. So it's a good place to look for votes as well to get to that goal of 1237. I spoke with Paul a couple hours ago, just casually, and he said they're getting a good reception. He said the RNC members the doors are open. Was the quote that he gave me. They're open to having a relationship with Mr. Trump and trying to soothe some of these wounds. He also said that the Trump campaign has a willingness to get involved in fundraising, to help candidates down ballot. And Paul even joked that Mr. Trump has a pretty good Rolodex himself, so he might be able to make more phone calls and not necessarily go out on the rubber chicken circuit if he were to become the party's nominee.
John, how's that pitch being received on the other side? You talked to Manafort about how he thinks things are going. What are you hearing from the folks that he's appealing to?
It's very much a mixed bag. Some people, are saying, well, we're just trying to keep an open mind here. We're going to let the process continue for the next few months. Obviously, some people are just, Trump is not their candidate, just like Cruz might not be their candidate, or they prefer Cruz or whatever. So, it's an ongoing process. As we speak, as the show airs right now, Manafort and Rick Wiley are briefing RNC members. Supposedly, we've got about a 90-minute presentation that they're giving. Manafort said he'd come out and speak with reporters after that was over here in about another 45 minutes or so. So we'll get some feedback from the RNC members who are in that room once they get out, and we'll have a little better sense for how the tone of the conversation's going.
John, the smarter RNC members you're talking to, where do they fit on the Steve Schmidt, Haley Barbour scale? Do they think Trump is almost certainly or inevitably going to be the nominee, or do they think this is a big jump ball still?
I've been a little bit surprised. You do still hear a lot of people talking about how this probably is going to second round in Cleveland. I would say if I had to, merge all the conversations I've had with members here over the last couple of days, the majority still seem to be on that side of the fence where they think this will go to a second round of balloting in Cleveland. Obviously, Trump had some great momentum this week, and he's probably going to get some more next week, and so maybe that'll start changing some mindset. One thing I think some of these RNC members are eager for the possibility, just like us reporters, we've never seen this in our lifetime. They're eager for the possibility of a contested convention. But I think they're starting to also realize that with that potential new exciting thing comes a lot of risk too, and nobody knows quite how this would play out. So they're balancing the potential for something new that they maybe want to be a part of with the risk of nobody knows what would happen on a second or third ballot in Cleveland.
We're talking a lot about the new Trump, John, about the various things that Donald Trump has been doing in the last few days to try to make himself more acceptable to elites and especially members of the Republican establishment. Do you hear people down there talking about that? Are they receiving that and saying, yeah, Trump's looking more presidential, or do they think this all is just kind of a momentary ploy and he's going to go back to being the old Donald Trump soon?
I think people say, okay, this is he's been the good Donald and the bad Donald quite a few times here in this election cycle, and I think people are sort of saying, this is sort of our last chance we want to give him to really start acting more presidential, to act in a more dignified sort of traditional way, and so I think they're giving him one more shot at that possibility, but there's some skepticism of how long that will last. John. There's also a little bit of maybe, I wouldn't say anger, but they're a little put off that he personally didn't come here. Ted Cruz came here, met with a lot of members individually, and John Kasich did that as well last night. So some of them, it's their big last meeting before the Cleveland convention, and typically a nominee or people running to be the nominee would come here and kiss the ring, and Mr. Trump didn't do that. He sent surrogates.
Let me ask you about two potential nominees. One is John Kasich, and ask you to address in the context of the discussions you've had down there about why he hasn't caught on more with the type of establishment Republican who's an RNC member who wants to win, given Kasich's superior poll standing against Clinton and Sanders. And second, is there any talk there about a white knight, or do people in the RNC basically think it's a Trump, Cruz, or maybe Kasich possibility?
Yeah, no, I'll take your second question first. You do not hear much talk about white knights here. Everybody seems to sort of believe that one of these three men who is still running for president is going to be the nominee. That said, you don't hear much conversation about John Kasich among these members. And like you say, Mark, this is theoretically a group that would be pretty friendly to Kasich. But they're seeing, the argument that he has only won he's the only won his home state so far as being potentially pretty troubling.
Okay, John McCormick down in Hollywood, Florida. We look forward to seeing what you find in the rest of the meeting, including that big Paul Manafort briefing. John, thanks very much. All right, coming up, comedy on the campaign trail and Hillary Clinton's Ladies of Laughter. You'll want to see that after. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can also listen to us anytime you want on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
To the real Hillary.
Oh my gosh! Well, they all have little bits and pieces, and I've probably laughed as much as anybody because there's always a little truth in it. I hate to confess.
That was this morning, joining a Good Morning America town hall. Hillary Clinton talking about the women who impersonate her on Saturday Night Live. Clinton may be a lot of things, but an easygoing performer who loves to laugh at herself isn't what a lot of people think, and probably it's not really true. Anyway. Luckily, she has some backup, and we called in some backup ourselves to talk about it. So here's our own Will Leach, the great Will Leach, telling you about how Clinton is taking advantage of some of her funnier friends.
It has become an axiom of modern politics that our presidential candidates need to, in a way, be our performer-in-chief. And generally speaking, almost all of them have fit the bill.
George W. Bush was excellent showing off his folksy charm on David Letterman, back when George W. Bush would go on David Letterman.
Number 2, give Oval Office one heck of a scrubbing.
President Obama was terrific at his deadpan slow burn with Zach Galifianakis.
Do you think a woman like Michelle would marry a nerd? Why don't you ask her whether she thinks I'm a nerd?
Could I?
No, I'm not going to let her near you.
And Hillary Clinton, though, suffice it to say, Hillary Clinton is not a natural performer.
You can sign a bill, and then you zap. That's it. Zap.
This is something, fortunately for her, that Hillary has become keenly aware of and no longer trying to fake. Because now she can rely on her female comedy friends. 8 years ago, there was no Inside Amy Schumer and no Aubrey Plaza and certainly no female Ghostbusters. Hillary had to face off against a charismatic Obama with no backup whatsoever. But in 2016, women are more powerful in comedy than ever, and they are openly on Hillary's side.
4 and 3 and 2 and 1.
Hillary appeared on a show called Broad City, the cult hit on Comedy Central that the Wall Street Journal called Sneak Attack Feminism.
She's walked on these floors. She's breathed this air. Take it in. Yeah, that is power. It smells decisive. It smells like confidence.
It's also hilarious, and the Broad City women are smart enough to know not to ask Hillary to do any heavy comedy lifting. They've got this. Thus,
thank you, Ilana. Thank you for all of your help.
You know of me?
Well, you're wearing a name tag.
Genius. Yes.
Hillary doesn't have to deadpan, she doesn't have to dance, she doesn't have to be wacky. She simply has to be herself.
Look at that. I thought this would be really good for office morale.
Also on Hillary's side, Ellen DeGeneres.
I think you stand for everything that I want in a president.
Amy Poehler, and yes, Amy Schumer.
What about you, Hill? You want to go skating? What about you? I'd love to. Do you have an extra pair?
Who may in fact be the most powerful comic working right now, and, one suspects, has something big planned if this does indeed turn out to be a Clinton-Trump matchup.
I just met Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I was pretty psyched about that. And a little discouraging, the amount of applause. But, come on, Hill.
Thanks again to the great Will Leach. And we'll be right back.
So as best we can tell, none of the presidential candidates have reacted, as the President of the United States has, to the passing of Prince. I'm wondering if you think which of the 5 will react and what they'll say.
I don't know. I find it's kind of stunning, given the wall-to-wall coverage of this death. He's genuinely one of the most seminal artists and successful artists, most important artists of our lifetimes. I find it kind of odd that none of them, Democrat or Republican, have come forward and said something as President Obama did.
I bet John Kasich reacts. I bet he liked Prince. It's my guess. All right.
He's a Kasich kind of guy.
Yeah. All right. Check out BloombergPolitics.com for all your coverage of 2016. Anything you want and need, you'll probably find there, including more coverage of today's RNC meeting in Florida by our dynamic duo of colleagues down there, John McCormick and Jennifer Jacobs. Coming up here on Bloomberg TV, Emily Chang speaks to the woman at the helm of Uber's biggest rival in China. You'll want to see that. Until tomorrow, thanks for watching. Sayonara.